All right, welcome Anchor Church. Glad to see you this morning. Thank you. Good to be back and glad to see you this morning. Glad to see so many of you out in the lobby. I was looking to say hi to some of you, and then also looking forward to getting back into teaching and then just worshiping together with you. So glad that you're here. Thanks for taking a minute to say hello to each other. We love doing that. That is something that I think there's a few things that when my wife and I were talking about starting a church that we definitely wanted to break from in terms of maybe the past traditions or some of the old school stuff that we grew up with. And so one of those was that we weren't going to do the meet and greet because nobody wants to do that. Well, we certainly weren't going to make visitors stand up and tell us your name and who invited you or something like that. So there were a number of things we were not going to do. But then I just heard that there were a few people that were coming and visiting. Nobody was saying hi to them and that kind of thing. And so leaving without anyone saying hi to me is like a crisis. We've got to do something about that. So for some of you that have maybe some emotional baggage about the meet and greet from a church you grew up in, I'm so sorry. But we do this here so that we can actually make sure to look around us, especially our partners, the members of our church, looking around us to see who might be standing alone, see who might be new or look new, and to greet them and make them feel welcome. So we just hope that you're welcome, hope that someone greeted you, and really glad that you're here this morning. My name's Chris, and my wife's name is Joanne, and I'm glad to be back. It's been about 6 weeks that we were off, and we took some time to just unplug a bit from life, and the summer was a good time to do that. No sports engagements or any other kind of commitments, and so we were able to unplug from all of that and even able to take a couple of trips, which were good for us, and we just really did enjoy that time, and it has been refreshing for us, and spending some time just, reorienting our perspective and then even just engaging in the Lord in a way that was fresh and good, and then engaging with each other as a family that was fresh and good. So anyway, just giving you a quick update. That's where I've been and that's what we've been up to, and have really just enjoyed that time and wanted to say that so that I could say thank you to the church for giving us several weeks off to be able to do that. So really glad though to be back. Glad to be back to some sense of normalcy. I like that the kids are going back to school and that I can go back to work and that I can get my week back and start feeling back to normal again in terms of just having a schedule. So as much as I've enjoyed being away, it's kind of like when you go on vacation, or something like that. As much as I've enjoyed unplugging, I also like to work. And so I'm looking forward to just getting back to work and getting back to some kind of rhythm. Well, so thank you for that time. As I get into the word today, I've got a couple of things I want to share with you that were just good for me and refreshing for me over the last 6 weeks. Spent some time talking to our family about this, and it's just, I'll get to it in a minute, but you can open up to your Bibles up to Psalm 127, and I'm just going to read the first couple of verses and get into that. Now, while you're flipping over there, I want to give you a couple of announcements. These announcements will be made at the end of the service too, so you don't have to worry about writing them down or remembering. And also, we'll be sending this out over social media. You can find it on our website or however you stay engaged. We'll send out a newsletter and other kinds of information as well. But this is something that I wanted to make sure I mentioned just a few things as you go to Psalm 127. The first is that next Sunday we'll be celebrating 10 years as a church formally. So there's a couple of years of build-up and core group dynamics that we did. So really we've been going at this for 12, 13 years, something like that. But we actually launched formally on Sundays and began to gather together 10 years ago, and we celebrate that next week. So I'm really looking forward to that and looking forward to celebrating that. We open up the floor for a few minutes, which can sometimes take 15 minutes, depending on how many of us engage, but open up the floor and just allow for some time for all of us to share with each other the things that God has done over the last year. From year to year, we do that. But we're going to open up the floor. So I'm giving you a heads up so that you might think this week about something you could share that God has done in your life through being a part of the community here at Anchor Church, and how that might encourage others to either engage or re-engage, or even just encourage us as a church family of all that God has done. So we want to give God glory and thank him for 10 years together. And then, but just before Sunday, that's next Sunday, actually this Thursday night will be the launch of our Leadership Institute, the cohorts that we always run. It's going to be very similar to that. We've actually just created a course that you can do online or in person, and we'll be talking about purpose and the purpose of our lives. And of course, we know that to be, following God and dedicating ourselves wholeheartedly to him, but he has created each of us uniquely. And so we'll talk a little bit about what it looks like to follow God and to understand better what it is he's calling us to do. So I'm excited about that. The first session starts this Thursday night. So if you haven't signed up, you have really waited until the last minute. And I respect that. I do. I get my best work done in the last minute. So I do honestly respect that. But I want you to be a part of this. I think it would be good for our church. Even if you're like, oh no, I got my purpose in life totally nailed down, then cool. Actually, I know some of us do. I mean, I know that God has called me to do certain things and has gifted me to do certain things. So there's an element in which this course really isn't just for me to discover my purpose, but I also want to understand the process here that we could, as a church, take others through so that we can actually show them some of maybe what they've been through or what they're good at or maybe what they're not good at, but talk them through this. And even in the midst of that, I intend to share the good news of Jesus and how God, through Jesus, will lead us to understand our purpose in him. So even if you've got it nailed down, I'm saying be a part of this and work with me. Let's partner together to make disciples, and let's show other people how to discover how God has designed them and what God might be calling them to do. So I'm encouraging you to do that. That's one last push to do that. And you'll get a newsletter and some other information coming out that you've got just a couple of days to sign up for that. So I'm encouraging you to do that. And then what was it? There was one other thing. Oh, and then community groups launch. I'm excited about that. So we launch in September, and then we launch again in February. So we launch for a semester, and then in the fall, and then a semester in the spring, and want you guys to participate in that. So be looking, be thinking, be praying, and then let's re-engage in community groups. I think that's it. I feel like I'm back. And so now I want to share all the updates and all the information. And so I'm going to just get into it. I'm actually most excited to share from the Word what God has just been sharing with me and comforting me with some realizations and some truths that I have found in his Word. So I've got probably several Psalms like this. I just chose this one today in hopes that it would encourage us together as a church, but even just that it might encourage some of us who might be a bit anxious, might be a bit worried, or just might need some encouragement to keep pushing into what God has for us. So Psalm 127, I'm going to read verses 1 and 2. Unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones. In verse 1, I'm gonna unpack this phrase by phrase. And in verse 1, he says, unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. And the thought that I have and even have been having and even praying about and that God has been working on my heart with each of these phrases, I'll share the same thing, but you can't build something that God isn't building. And what I mean is it may prove in the end to be fruitless. It may prove in the end that you were unable to accomplish it. And I think that that's important for me to remember too. So I'm being transparent a little bit too, but just remembering some of these things and even sharing with you that you might be thinking through some of this too. When I think about the Lord building a house and the work of the builders is wasted, obviously he's talking about building something. Maybe he's talking about starting something. Maybe he's talking about fortifying something, like building some reinforcements and doing that kind of thing. And as I thought about that, I thought, yeah, Lord, I don't want to build something that you're not building. So unless the Lord is building it, then I don't want my work in building or starting or fortifying or creating or any of that kind of stuff to be useless or wasted. It's not just that we can't do that. Like if God's not opening the doors, then we just aren't going to be able to do that. It's also that we don't want to do that. I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize that I had invested my energy in building something that really wasn't something that God was investing in, or that I had not just wasted my time, but that I'd worked so hard and in the end had wasted all of that on something that wasn't really what God had called me to do. I think a lot of us at least would share that same sentiment. I mean, there's no way really to know, except I've got a few helps for us today. No way to really know if what we're doing is just a waste of time. But I do think from time to time we wonder that, like, God, is what I'm doing a waste of time? Is this worth anything? Is this helping anybody? Is this accomplishing anything? And I guess what I'm trying to say, even as I read this, I think, okay, Lord, unless you do a work, or unless it's up to you and unless you accomplish something, then it is really useless and worthless for me to be investing energy in something you're not calling me to do, leading me to do, or opening up doors for me to do. So what it's done for me, just that one line, and I'll share each of those lines and what they've done, is just reminded me that I need to always be lining up with what God is calling me to do. That's, I mean, almost, it's a daily basis of just saying, Lord, what is it that you have for me? Is there anyone today that I might encounter? Is there anyone I need to remember to pray for? I'm being intentional. I would want us to be intentional to think about who we would pray for, who we might encounter, what opportunities we might be thinking about, but always lining ourselves up to say, Lord, I'm gonna work hard today. I'm gonna give myself to the people that I encounter and to the opportunities that I encounter and to the work that you've got for me to do. I'm gonna give myself to that and even to my family and to the responsibilities I have at home, not just work, but even at home or in the neighborhood or at recreation. I'm gonna give myself to that and enjoy that. But Lord, I wanna stay open and considerate and even intentional toward you in terms of you being clear with me about what it is you're calling me to do and want me to do. So today and every day and for the rest of my life, I only want to work on what you're working on, Lord. That's healthy. It's good. And I would want us to line ourselves up with that. So you can't build something God's not building. Sometimes it's just the doors close and you have to accept that. And it's also good for us too, because you don't want to build something that God isn't building. And so I think we do need to work hard. I just think that we need to rely on God to build what we're working on. And in the end, what happens too is that when we do that, when we acknowledge God and respect God and stay open to Him, then at the end of having built something, who do you think you'd be more likely to give the credit to, having kept yourself open to Him, following Him, listening to Him the whole way? Well, it would be God. Having the right posture as we work is really what I'm talking about here too, which is just staying open and considerate and intentional to the Lord to say, Lord, I'm working here. If something takes off or if something is accomplished or if anything is accomplished at all, I'm gonna see that nothing can be built unless the Lord does it. And so God, you get all the glory. And so it really does kind of wrap up nicely here when you think about it, that we follow the Lord and stay open to Him. So there's one thing, I guess that's one way to look at it is, okay, I'm gonna work hard, but I'm gonna rely on God to build and work and give Him the glory and give Him the credit when it does get built or if anything does get accomplished. That's one way to look at it. And then another way to look at it too is that I'm not just gonna work hard and then hope that God blesses it and builds it and then give Him the glory for that. I also wanna take some time in my own life to find what God is building, like what doors are actually opening, and then pursue that. Like, I need a friend, and this person is texting me, but I don't want to be their friend. I actually want to be that guy's friend. And so what I guess I'm saying is there are times in our lives where God might be opening a door and giving us something that we need, but we're overlooking that because we're trying to build something over here that just can't seem to connect, can't seem to work. That happens in relationships, that happens in careers, that happens in our spiritual journey, that happens just in so many areas of our lives where we're trying to build something and it's not working, and yet there may be other open doors that we need to consider and ask God to maybe open our eyes to see, but then to invest in those places where God seems to be opening those doors. That was good for me to see. Work hard, rely on God to build, but also take a little bit of an inventory and see what is God building? What doors is God opening? And then humbly follow Him into those and see that He doesn't work with you in there. Now, the second line, that was a sermon in itself, but this is the second line, is so good too. Unless the Lord protects a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. So unless the Lord is protecting a city, you can have as many sentries along the top of that wall or along the base of that city wall. You can have as much protection as you can afford to have. And yet, if the Lord isn't protecting that city, those walls will come down. that city will be overcome. So it's another reminder here, not just that we need to take and pay attention to what we're building or what we're starting or what we're creating or what we're fortifying, but even what we're guarding, what we're protecting, what we might be hedging, what we might be clinging to, trying to protect. I think this can be really helpful to us as well. You can't, the 2 points I have are you can't do it and you don't want to do it. That was the same with the first point. Here's the second point. You can't protect something that God isn't protecting. When you try to cling to something that feels like is being let go or being taken away or something like that, then it's almost like sand falling through your fingers as you try to grasp and keep and control and protect. And so you can't actually protect something that God isn't protecting. But then I would want us to see that you don't want to protect something that God isn't protecting or guard or hoard something that God isn't wanting you to hoard or guard or protect like that. So I guess on that point, I would say there's really nothing that you can protect or guard or keep or hoard or whatever that you can protect by worrying about it. Or even giving yourself fully to every measure of protection so that you don't lose what you love or so that you don't get what you don't want. You cannot protect yourself from those things that are happening in our lives. And there's really an element of trust here that I'm gonna get to in just a little bit. But the point I guess I'm making here too is that we need to guard and protect with wisdom in terms of stewarding the things that God has given us, the opportunities and the friendships and even the material things that he's given us, houses and cars and even the grass, we should keep it kept. And we should just be good stewards of all that God has given us, but you can't guard and protect everything, particularly that God might be taking away or might be changing even. And even in my own life, I've had to acknowledge that there are seasons where there are things that I used to do that I can't do. And there are even seasons in the church too, where there are certain traditions and certain things that we've loved to do as a church that we can't do or don't do anymore, and we make changes to those things. So for instance, even in the church, we cannot build a kind of church that maybe God isn't wanting us to build. We cannot protect an old way of doing church that maybe God wants to change. It's his church. And he may have some different direction he wants us to head in. Or he may have some ideas he wants us to pursue. Maybe some pathways into friendship and relationship with people that might be different than the ways we used to connect with people and those kinds of ideas. So there may be fresh ways of reaching people, fresh ways of thinking about church that God may want us to think about as a church. Now, I say that from like an organizational church-wide standpoint, not to sort of build us up for something I'm about to say, but just that this works for organizations, it works for your business or your ministry, it also works for you personally. You cannot build what God isn't building, it's fruitless. And you can't protect what God's not protecting, that's fruitless too. You cannot hang on for dear life to keep what seems like is falling through your fingers. Now, again, that applies to jobs and relationships and any other sort of sector of life that you can think of. It applies here. So guard and protect with wisdom. Guard and protect your assets with wisdom, but rely on God ultimately to guard and protect you. So that if you're, like most of us experienced, if your 401k has plummeted since COVID, maybe it's had some comeback effect, I don't know, but if something like that happens, what can you do? Well, I'll just reinvest, I'll think about this and I'll do that. But there are things that happen to us. Now that's just one example that I felt like was neutral enough since I haven't actually had a conversation with anybody about that. So it didn't feel like I was sharing maybe what we had talked about privately. But that's an example of something that, man, it could be maybe potentially devastating, but you can't protect what it seems that God hasn't protected. You're gonna have to pray. You're gonna have to lean into that. You're gonna need to do your best with wisdom to guard and protect or to build and create, but you're gonna have to, in the end, trust the Lord to make that fruitful, to make that accomplished, to protect that or to guard that for you. So as I think about this, there really are just a few things too that I think we should be giving ourselves to fully in terms of what we can guard and what we can protect. So what I would say then is we need to guard and protect with wisdom, but then rely on God to guard and protect us. But then I think we also need to find what is it that God is actively guarding and protecting in life, and how do we get in on that? How do we participate with him on that? So not just what is he building, what doors are opening, but also what is he protecting and what is he guarding and what has he called us to guard and to partner with him in building and partner with him in guarding and protecting. Now, because we're in church, I have to say that the church is what Jesus said he would build. So we kind of need to get on with partnering him in building the church. He's going to build it, but we are his co-laborers. He has called us as harvesters into the field to share the good news of Jesus. And so for all of the things that we could be building, we cannot neglect what God himself is building, and that is his church. He is building his church. And he's doing that one by one as we make disciples of all nations. That's how he's doing that. And so I, for one, of all the things I want to build, of all the things I want to start, of all the things that I want to create, and there is a list of those things. Be happy to share that with you sometime. I think that one of the things I cannot neglect, I just cannot overlook and cannot neglect, and I would encourage you to do the same, is to consider that one of the things that Jesus has said he will build is his church. And so we need to get on with thinking through that lens. So I just don't want us, not that we are neglecting that, just want you to think through, what does that look like then? I guess that means I need to join Anchor Church and start serving and giving and all of that. Yeah, I don't want to undercut any of that momentum. I think that would really help in a season like this. But the truth is, no, I think it just means you being considerate and intentional to those around you, to consider yourself as a missionary and partner in the gospel to make disciples wherever God sends you. That's what it is at its core. So it's not just about joining a church. It's not about writing a check and giving money to a church. That's not building the church. That does build the church, but it's more like secondary effect, secondary commitment, which would be like, man, I'm committed to the great commission of Jesus Christ. I'm committed to the good news of Jesus Christ. I want more people to hear about that. So I'll just give a little money and the pastor can do it. Well, it just doesn't work that way. What I guess I'm saying is, man, I want us to partner together and create a church together and cultivate a culture within our church that really does emphasize the right things and minimize the second and third things that we really should not be dividing over. I want those kinds of things. And I think it's going to take all kinds of partnership. Yes, we have to serve together and give together, live together, groups together. All those things are all good, but I wanted, and I felt like God was really drawing it back down for me too. Kris, at the core though, I want you to be a disciple maker. And it's just been refreshing for me to see that this was something that came up even at family camp while we were there. The speaker said that God didn't create humans so that he could have workers. He created us so that he could have children. It was good for me to remember that I'm not just his worker. It's not just my job to work for him. I'm his child. So in a bit of transparency, I'm wanting you to see that too, that it's not just that we need you to work and need you to give and need you to do this and need to build something that maybe God's not building or is or whatever. I'm saying and making a renewed and fresh call to us that let's be about building the church. Let's be about making disciples and sharing this good news we have with as many people as we have opportunity to share with. That's what God's building. That's where we get on. And that's what I think is where we'll see God actually partnering with us and blessing and opening those kinds of doors. But even here, when it comes to what God is protecting and guarding, I thought of a couple of things. You might be able to think of more. I thought that, he's actually guarding his word. And Paul even tells Timothy to guard the word. And the way you guard the word is maybe differently than you might guard your savings account. Here's what I mean. I don't know when I realized this. It was several years ago, and maybe I heard it, but I can't remember. But when it comes to the gospel, the good news of Jesus, and when it comes to guarding the gospel, to make sure that the truth of the gospel is never tarnished or that it never goes away, the only way to guard and protect the gospel, it's different than anything else, is that you actually have to give it away over and over and over again. You have to keep giving it away for us to protect it and guard it. In other words, it has to get passed down to the next generation. You have to give it to someone. You have to share the gospel in its truth and its goodness in love. You have to share that good news in order to keep it and protect it. And so that's, for me anyways, a little different than you might think about what it means to guard or protect it. It feels more like wrapping your arms around something and clinging to it tightly, but we can't do that with the gospel. Now, we would do that in our hearts, like I'm clinging to the good news of Jesus, but when it comes to the gospel, I've got to just keep giving it away. And that's the only way to guard and protect the gospel, to ensure that it stays alive, to ensure that people hear it, and to ensure that it has its intended effect on the nations. So that, for me, is what it looks like. So there's his word, and then even my own heart. Guard your heart, for out of it come the issues of life. So we're guarding his word, which means giving it away, giving away. And then with our hearts, we're guarding our hearts. And I wouldn't say that that's the same thing, like I'm just giving my heart away relationally to everyone. However, there is an element, though, of transparency and connection and intimacy that we can find in terms of brotherhood and sisterhood in the church. But when I think about guarding our hearts, I think the heart is sort of the mind, will, and emotions. That's how some have defined it or described it. But I think about our thoughts and our feelings and our actions, our decisions, guarding those things. Those things are all sort of rooted in our beliefs and our character. So I don't have a lot of control over the things that happen to me from day to day. That's been good for me to remember and even wrestle with. But what I do have control over is staying in the word, guarding and protecting it by sharing it with others. And then I also do have control over the way I respond to the things that are happening to me, my thoughts and my feelings, my decisions, my actions, which are really all rooted in sort of what I believe and my own personal character. So I'm focusing on those things, which was, again, refreshing, renewing. So unless the Lord builds a house, the work of the builders is wasted. Unless the Lord builds a city, guarding it with sentries will do no good. It is useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, anxiously working for food to eat. That first phrase, useless for you to work so hard from early morning until late at night, stood out to me. And I just asked myself a couple of good questions, and I want you to do the same. What causes you to rise early? In terms of more like anxious working. What causes you to rise early just because you can't stop thinking about it? What causes you to stay up late or even lose sleep at night because you're just anxiously worried or anxiously working? Even if you're not able to do anything, your mind is just constantly working. Is there anything like that? Again, it could be any number of things happening to us, to our bodies, health issues. It could be relational issues. It could be financial issues. It could be maybe a decision that needs to be made or a change that needs to be made, a conversation that needs to be had. Is there anything like that? And I think for me, it was interesting to just pray and take some inventory and say, is there anything keeping me up at night? Is there anything waking me up early? Is there anything that I'm maybe working really hard for, like anxiously working for, and it's affecting me? And so just began to write 1 or 2 or 3 things down and then ask the Lord to help me with that and to work with that. I'm encouraging you to do the same thing. I think that for me anyway, I think that that's a good way to tell that we're sort of anxiously working for something is if the worry of it, the anxiety about it is keeping us up or we're getting up early or going to bed late or just waking up in the middle of the night about it, that kind of thing. Now, there may be some counseling issues that you should pursue, and there may be some health issues that you might need to pursue. So I'm not really talking about extreme cases or maybe some cases. I don't want anyone to feel shame because maybe they do have sort of like a clinical diagnosis or something like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about your day-to-day worries and the things that we worry about. So I want to take the edge off there and just say all of us have some measure of anxiety about something from time to time, and I just want to talk about that kind of stuff. So as I think about it too, it's useless to work so hard, rising early and going to bed late. But he says, anxiously working for food to eat. Now, I don't know about you guys. I haven't really missed that many meals, at least not intentionally. I tried intermittent fasting with a good buddy, and I actually have been able to do that from time to time. So I do miss some of my meals, but I don't miss them. And when I think about anxiously working, as I read this, I thought, anxiously working for something so basic as food to eat? I would think like he might put like anxiously working for success, anxiously working for fame, or anxiously working for something, that feels a little more unattainable, but food feels attainable. And then I thought, maybe that's just it. We're working so hard for food or for basic provision. And it drew my attention to thinking like, maybe all of some of the work we do, me or just some of these seasons we come in and out of, is us working really hard to provide for ourselves, the self-provision, and even the self-protection. You can't build something God isn't building. You can't protect something God isn't protecting. And it's reminding me now that this anxious working can sometimes be rooted in a desire we have to provide something for ourselves that either we feel like is lacking, or to protect ourselves from something that we feel like might be imminent or dangerous. So I think a good exercise for you might be kind of what I'm doing and what I've done, or just the way I thought about this was, okay, find where you're anxiously working, like where your mind is working, or where you're just giving a lot of energy and time to. Find where you're anxiously working, actually have the realization that it's driven by self-provision or self-protection, and then reverse engineer that by asking some good questions like this. What am I trying to provide for myself? What am I trying to provide that apparently God isn't giving, or that doors aren't opening for? What am I trying to provide? And what am I afraid of? For your moments of anxiety. What am I afraid of? And what am I afraid will happen if? And then just really doing the work of getting to the bottom of some of this anxious working when God provides those basic necessities. So I think there's so many kinds of mindset that can creep into our lives, but it seems like the last couple of years post-COVID, it's really tempting to have a couple of these mindsets, and maybe you can add to your own list as you think more about it. But the two I have, and for sake of time, which I'm out of, the first one is a scarcity mindset. Just the constant feeling of not having enough. Not everyone has this, and it actually isn't just something that one person has and they have it for the rest of their life. We come in and out of seasons of this kind of thing. So you may not be particularly struggling, but it would be helpful for you to know or pass this along to someone who might be struggling. But this sort of scarcity mindset makes us feel like we just constantly feel like we don't have enough time, enough money, enough friends, enough energy, and down the list goes. We just don't have enough, and I need more. And it drives us to anxiously working. And it's not just that there's a constant feeling sometimes of not having enough. I think there's also a shame mindset that we have or adopt, or that can creep in too, where we feel like we're not being enough. Like something's inherently wrong with me. I am not able to, or I am not being enough. I'm not doing enough, and I'm not being enough. And so this scarcity and shame will creep in. And I think that what happens is they drive us to anxiously working, really just to no end. Just working. Not just to no end, but for no end. It doesn't really accomplish anything. You're never going to have enough on your own. You're never going to be enough on your own. That was good for me to see and to realize too. I think it's good for us to see that you cannot be a self-made person. You need others to be a part of your journey. You need others to be a part of the story you tell when you tell about what God has done or what others have done, to be a part of all that you're doing. You cannot go it alone. And so when I think about this, for me anyway, I think we need others. We need someone in particular, someone who can help to provide for you. You need someone who can open doors for you, someone that might be on the inside, that can put in a good word for you. You need someone who can help you see that perhaps maybe a friend who can help you see, or someone that can help you see that what you already have might be already enough. Someone who can help you rest or relax a little bit. You also, not just with the scarcity mindset, but even with the shame, someone who can affirm your worth to them. Someone who isn't ashamed to be your friend. You know, the best way to alleviate shame is for someone to share what they're ashamed of and for you to step closer instead of running away. And so I think what I guess I'm saying is you need someone who steps closer to you. You need someone who can love you, and that would alleviate the shame and anxiety and make room for rest in your soul. Do you guys want to guess who I'm going to say could do that perfectly? Well, let's just read the passage, okay? So the verse 2 says, anxiously working for food to eat, for God gives rest to his loved ones. Well, anxiously working, when I think about anxiously working, I'm not usually anxious. If I'm anxiously working, it's not usually for rest. I'm not usually anxiously working for rest. I'm anxiously working for something, but it's not so that God would give me rest. It's not always what I'm asking for. And so then I had to kind of think through this a little bit and say, wait a second, why would rest to his loved ones be an answer to anxiously working? Well, it's the byproduct, I think, of realizing that he really can provide for you what you're anxiously working for in self-provision. He really can protect you with what you're anxiously working for in self-protection. So I'm not talking about not working hard anymore, like, phew, that's good, so I don't have to go to work tomorrow. No, I'm saying we should totally work hard. We should definitely work hard. But you can work hard without anxiously working. It doesn't have to be anxious. It's really a matter of what you're working for. It's the difference between working for a place of rest and working from a place of rest. So as you think about it, what you might be doing with anxious toil is, it's the kind of line of reasoning that says, if I can just have this, then I will finally feel this. If I can just get this, then I will finally be this. It's the thing, it's the goal for which we are anxiously working towards. And that thing is our source of rest. Like, I would be able to totally rest if I could just get there, if I could just have that, if I could just be that. And so the difference then would be to have found some source of satisfaction and meaning in life apart from those things so that I could give myself fully to the work that God's calling me to do without attaching to those things too much significance. So I guess what I'm saying here is we are working from a place of rest when we can rest in all that God has provided for us and all that he will provide for us. And we can rest in all the ways that he has protected us and that he will protect us. And when we truly believe that, I think we can step out in faith and work hard as he's calling us to work without all the anxiety that maybe no one's gonna provide, or maybe no one's gonna protect, or maybe I gotta do this for myself. We can rest in a God who really does love us. And that's my next point here. When I think about this, he's calling us to rest in his love. Notice who he gives his rest to. It says in the verse that God gives his beloved rest. He gives rest to his loved ones. Well, how can you know if you're one of his loved ones? Well, you'll just have to believe that it's true. I'll tell you, you are one of his loved ones, and now you need to just believe that. Simple. But you do need to wrestle with that, is what I'm saying. The scriptures over and over again tell us of the great and deep love that God has for us. And I think the next step of faith for us is fighting to believe that it's true, especially when it feels like he's not providing, or especially when it feels like maybe he hasn't protected. Those are the real moments where we have to take a step of faith and believe that although my circumstances look differently, I am choosing to believe that God really does love me, he will protect me, he will provide for me. And perhaps the anxiety-driven self-provision and self-protection really come from failing to remember or failing to believe how deeply loved we are by God. And if he loves us, then we can trust him. So I'm calling us today to rest in his love. Trust in him. Join me. Trust in him to provide for you. He really does love you. Trust in him to protect you. He really does love you. And take that step of faith with me today. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for a chance to just share what's been on my mind and on my heart for the last few weeks, and what we as a family have talked about, and what you've really shown me, and how you've revealed even over the last year or two, just some of the anxiety-driven work to protect and to provide and to think and to start and to guard and all of those kinds of things, Lord. I release them, and I do this publicly so that I can lead our church into this, God. I pray that each of us would do the same. Just take an inventory of what's going on inside and release the anxiety-driven propensity we have to provide for ourselves, especially when it feels like and is driven by lack of faith in you. Maybe we're afraid that you're not going to provide or that you haven't provided. Or to protect ourselves when we feel like we're afraid that you haven't or that you won't. So God, I pray, help us to be wise and help us to be active and help us to be going. But as we do all of those things, Lord, would you give us a real heart of faith? Would you give us rest in our souls? Would you help us to see your great love for us? And would that ease the angst in us, Lord, please, through your Spirit, ease the angst and increase our confidence in you. I pray, Lord, that you would help us to trust you. You have been so trustworthy. Holy Spirit, would you help us to see and to believe and to trust? I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.